Well, hello and welcome to Prime Time. Well, as you can see, we're not in studio tonight because we've got a special programme on one of the most intriguing figures to emerge in Irish public life in a really long time. Well, look, this is a man who loves to take on the establishment. Last summer, he successfully led the charge against the Lisbon Treaty, making plenty of enemies along the way in Brussels and Leinster House. And just today it emerged he's making final preparations to form his own pan-European political party, standing guard, he says, against Lisbon.eu. And all the while in the background, the questions continue to be asked. Just who is he? How did he make his money? Does his incredible life story actually stack up? And what does he really want? Well, tonight, Primetime's Katie Hannon goes behind the questions to examine the facts. And she takes a close-up look at the enigma that is Declan Ganley.
Brash, likeable and enigmatic.
Great worker, loving son, caring.
He has an instinctive ability to see what might happen.
He always had a real can-do attitude.
He is a man who seems to have an extraordinary disregard for the truth.
Driven, very sociable and uncompromising.
I suppose when you meet him first, and I'll be honest, slightly intimidating individual. But I would say, in the best possible sense of the word, dominating.
Confident, energetic, and most of all, mysterious.
In recent years, he has become a serious player in business and politics. His trail takes us from Eastern Europe to Washington, to Central America, to Baghdad. His story is incomplete, but it starts with Sean and Josephine Ganley, emigrants from the west of Ireland who met in London. Declan, their first child, was born in Watford in July 1968.
So what are you doing? How are you getting on?
We had to go there because we didn't have pull here. We couldn't get jobs. We had no contacts. We weren't able to, they call it networking now. We had no network. We weren't able to network. And we went to Britain, and Declan was born there, as were our other two children.
The Ganleys moved back to Glenamaddy, County Galway in 1981 when Declan was 13.
As a child, it was interesting coming back because sometimes you were seen as an outsider, and yet in here, love of my country and of my Irishness, it's the essence of what I am. It's very, very important to me.
People accepted us, knew our families from before, and understood our background and where we had come from. And Declan retained his accent because of the age he was.
He liked to do his own thing, and wherever he was interested, he followed that up. And if other people wanted to join him, fine, but he had no problem in being alone in what he was doing, providing he was happy at it. His business teacher and himself used to have lots of rapport about the stock market, and his idol was Michael Smurfit.
He arrived in here one day with a very strange looking paper, kind of a pinky paper, the Financial Times. We had heard of it, but we'd certainly not seen too much of it around here. We had no business with it. It was way above our heads. And I thought, what on earth is he up to now?
What age was he at that stage?
I suppose 14, 15, 16.
There's that yearning, I think, that, in a youngster to want to go out and sort of chart on, go into new territory and do things that haven't been done before, and it was something that fascinated me, and it was, I think, just in the blood.
I had one final push to get him to do third level, and I said, Declan, you'll be such an age, I forget now what figure I mentioned at the time, you'll be 24, 25, the world will be your oyster, you'll have a solid education under your belt. Dad, I'll be a millionaire when I'm that age.
He left for London straight from school, and after working in pubs and construction, he took a job as a tea boy with insurance brokerage Furnace Holder. From here, his life took an improbable turn. Barely out of his teens, he emerged via Moscow in the former Soviet Union. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, the port here at Riga became the gateway to the west for Russia. And it was here that Declan Ganley says he spotted his first opportunities, trading first in Siberian aluminium and then in Russian timber. But back in the 1990s, the port here at Riga was a notoriously difficult place in which to do business.
Riga was one of the centers of organized crime of the former Soviet Union, and its ports were criminalized, and they were used to ship large amounts of raw metal and materials out of the former Soviet Union to Western European markets. Anyone involved with it was subject to a hit, and just numerous individuals died.
The aluminium industry, perhaps, but that was in Russia. And of course, I wasn't in that for very long. Any business built in an emerging market at that time was potentially subject to being targeted by unsavory elements.
Did you understand what he was doing? Did you have a sense that he was being very successful, or...?
I had some grasp of the success he was having and of what his business involved, but of course, being of a young age, you have a limited understanding of what's really involved.
You just couldn't worry anymore. It's like leave him in the hands of God, because there's nothing basically we can do. Now he's in Russia, and now he's in here, there, and everywhere, and you just hoped. And he always turned up. He'd always lend back, and you say, "Thank God that's over." On to the next thing.
The aspiring entrepreneur linked up with the seasoned Reagan administration insider Don DeMarino.
I met Declan in 1992 when I was coming out of government, and he's tackling some of the toughest developing country markets, Russia, places. So I figured this would be a nice combination. His youth and energy, which I no longer had, and my ability to negotiate with governments.
There was another Irishman in Riga at that time. Michael Burke, sent by the IMF to clean up the banking system in Latvia, recalls meeting Declan Ganley by chance at a city hotel. It was the only time they would ever meet, but it was an encounter Michael Burke would not forget.
Even though he was British sounding, he told me that in actual fact he was Irish and from Glenamaddy, and that stuck in my brain for years afterwards. And he said that he was involved in international trade and that he would be setting up his own bank. I asked him what bank that would be, and he said Ganley, probably Ganley International Bank, and he was getting a license from the Minister of Finance.
And did that bank open?
No. The bank didn't open. I spoke with the Bank of Latvia, the central bank, next morning to ask if there were any Irish banks, or indeed Ganley International Bank, in planned. No, there was no evidence or no information. I've lived here for a long time in Riga. I lived for 14, 15 years, and through all those years you gradually get to know everybody, especially in the expatriate business community here. It's a very small country, small number of people involved in commerce and administration. Paths cross a lot, and we never came across Declan Ganley.
Declan Ganley has often spoken of how his friendship with the Latvian Popular Front led to his being appointed a government advisor here when he was only just 24. It's an impressive claim, but just how closely connected with that government was he?
I got involved with the Latvian government, became an advisor to one of their junior ministers, and was involved in that whole sort of looking at the privatisation process as Latvia was straightening itself out following its detachment from the Soviet Union.
As it happens, Latvia's current Premier, Ivars Gudmanis, was Premier in the government that Ganley advised. Or did he?
Mr. Prime Minister met some businessmen and experts and so on, but he didn't recall him as a, let me say, influential advisor or consultant for the government in this time.
And in terms of Mr. Ganley's relationship with the Popular Front, he has no recall of him from that time either?
yes, the Mr. Godmanis was the one of the leaders of the Latvian Popular Front, and I'm sure that if the Mr. Ganley was such influential advisor or friend or what, he would recall him.
But he doesn't recall him at all.
But he doesn't.
As you know, we went to Latvia and we asked the current Prime Minister, who happens to have been the first Prime Minister back in '92. Now, he actually can never recall meeting you.
The guy I was working with was Per Sternich.
Per Sternich was briefly a Deputy Minister of State back in 1992. He now runs a timber company.
Mr. Sternich?
Yeah.
I apologise for arriving into you. Katie Hannon, I spoke to you on the phone yesterday from Irish Television. I just thought, I know you're so busy, and I thought if we just turned up, you might just give us 5 minutes of your time.
Well, basically, yes, I don't have anything to add, yes, to what I've said already.
But it's, I need it to be on camera because it's for a television report.
No way.
No way?
No way. No way.
Although Mr. Sternich declined to be interviewed on camera, he did clarify Declan Ganley's role for us. He said he was one of dozens of people putting business proposals to his government at the time. He stressed that he was not a paid advisor.
I've never said that this was, that I was the Secretary of State of Latvia or anything like that.
No, you said you were appointed the Foreign Economic Affairs Advisor to the Republic of Latvia.
A Foreign Economic Affairs Advisor responsible for dealing specifically at that time actually with the GCC countries. That is a fact. If you wish to dispute that, that is, you're right. But it's a fact, and it's a fact that can be proven. And anybody.
Yet the one person that we went to stand it up.
That's, I spoke to him. He called me after he spoke to you. He told me the content of your conversation. I don't know if you have a recording of that conversation, but maybe we should revisit it with the former minister.
Primetime is satisfied that Per Sternich offered us his honest recollection of Mr. Ganley's role at the time. From apartment 7 in this block in the Riga suburbs, Declan Ganley pursued his burning ambition to become a millionaire. Backed by American investors, he took a long-term lease on a state forest in Russia, 300 miles north of Moscow. Glenrock Holdings, Ganley's company behind the venture, was registered in Cyprus.
Cyprus was the offshore locale for most of Russian business because they could travel to Cyprus without visas. There was not transparency in the financial community, and the investigators were not helping in international investigations. So there was no transparency in financial markets.
And this was particularly Cyprus, of all the other offshore places you could register a company?
Particularly Cyprus.
After 3 years developing the project, Ganley found a buyer for the Russian forest, a consortium led by oligarch Boris Jordan. The sale price was undisclosed.
We understand you personally made about $1 million out of that deal.
Do you? I've nothing to say on that.
Why have you never revealed how much you made out of your aluminium and timber businesses?
Because it's nobody's business except my own. Those are private businesses, and those are things that one keeps private. But I'm not going to argue with your figure.
But I've never seen a set of accounts for a company he owns or has a shareholding in that's making money. I've never seen that.
But surely it's generally accepted that he has had some business success.
I know, but I'm answering your questions. Have I ever seen a verification of a profit by Mr. Ganley? I'm not suggesting he never made one, but I'm saying I've never seen one. I have no detail of it.
By the time he closed the forestry deal, Declan Ganley made perhaps the boldest move of his life. 3 weeks after meeting New Yorker Delia Paternick in a London restaurant, he proposed to her. They were married by the end of the year.
I knew that very, very soon after I met her. Almost, the first night I met her. And I made a decision, and very surprisingly, she said yes. And that's the best decision I ever made in my life.
Operating from this Mayfair address, the pursuit of new business took Declan Ganley to Bulgaria, where he reportedly made $18 million on the sale of Cabletel, But he had non-starters in Croatia, Nicaragua and Central Africa. He then bid for the Irish mobile phone licence, but lost out to ESAT.
At a news conference today, ESAT were slow to reveal their exact plans on pricing. When pressed, Chairman Denis O'Brien...
The other people involved, most notably Denis O'Brien, were high-profile figures. We knew who they were, we knew where their money had come from, we knew what they were about. And then this Declan Ganley character arrives out of the blue in a pinstripe suit and says, hey, you need to talk to me. The thing was, when you met him, when you first saw him, you thought, this is somebody I'm not going to like. But when you talked to him, he was actually a very likeable character. It came across as relatively genuine, except when you started to ask him, so Declan, where did you make all your money, you know?
Leaving behind his modest dwelling in Riga, he purchased Moyne Park outside Tuam, County Galway. His father oversaw its grand restoration before Declan and Delia moved in. Moyne Park would later become headquarters to both Rivada Networks and the Libertas Institute.
In 1999, he bid for Irish Fertilisers, and I was asked to do a profile of him for the Irish Times business section. I knew nothing of him. I was given a CV with certain details on it, and one of them was concerning 6 TV stations in Central America. I went to check it out. I spoke with Mr. Ganley's stated partner in that venture, a Nicaraguan businessman, and he told me indeed he had dealings with Mr. Ganley. They had intended to put up 6 or create 6 TV stations, but in fact it had never happened.
Is it really that unusual for a businessman to maybe talk up his
in my experience, it would be unprecedented for somebody to say, I have 6 TV stations in Central America, and you go and ring the alleged business partner and he says, oh yeah, we discussed that, but it never happened. I mean, that's strange.
Other ventures sank without trace. Adornus, an online jewellery store, and Capital Route, a Europe-wide chauffeur service.
This is a man who is obviously no stranger to risks, and if you go for the riskier ventures, well then some of them it's more likely that you'll have failures as well as successes in your wake.
And his next venture was certainly risky, in Tirana, Albania. In the mid-1990s, when Albania was privatising its state industries, every citizen received privatisation vouchers. One fund began to collect these vouchers, promising to invest them on the people's behalf. The man behind it went on national television to promote it.
That's right. Well, the collection process continues as we speak.
In 1996, Declan Ganley came here to Tirana to launch the Anglo-Adriatic Fund amid a blaze of publicity. For Albanians emerging from a repressive communist regime, this was going to be their big opportunity to have a real stake in their country's economy. But all the plans and the promises came to nothing. And 12 years on, many Albanians are feeling bitter and betrayed.
Muharrem Pilkati was 65 when he put everything he had into Anglo-Adriatic, spending his savings on extra vouchers to invest in the fund. Now 78, he's speaking out on behalf of the thousands of others who bought into the dream.
Invalid, jemi shtresa me varfër. Ti e sa janë pensionet tona këtu. Gjitha kursimet e tyre I kanë hedhur këtu, në këto letrat. Të gjitha kursimet e tyre kanë djersa gjaku. Ne jemi.
Did people lose their savings in that?
No, that fund did not collect cash. These are a form of bond, of government bond.
I actually do understand the background to it, but in terms that I understand there was an informal trade in those bonds going on at the time. And some people did actually put their life savings because because you seemed like a very good bet.
Well, that's news to me.
Anglo-Adriatic insist that they are blameless in this debacle. Having collected the vouchers in good faith under government licence, they were ultimately never allowed to invest them. What went wrong has never been explained.
Well, you have to go and talk to the government of Albania. They had the bright idea to issue them, but I don't think they had the political courage to honor them.
Mënyrën më të poshtër, iku Pa respektuar kreditorit shqiptar, të paktën të thoshte që, qofse nuk ish fajtor, të thoshte që unë I grumbullova këto, edhe I kam këtu, nuk I futa dot në procesin e privatizimit, për këtë ose atë faj. Në fakt nuk është prononcuar fare.
Anglo-Adriatic is back in the news in Albania in recent months, with the death in suspicious circumstances of the Albanian lawyer and businessman Kosta Trubitska, who has been described in media reports as a former director of the fund. This amateur film shows Mr. Trubitska's body as it was discovered, just months after becoming a whistleblower on a corrupt arms deal and implicating senior Albanian politicians. There has never been any suggestion that his death was in any way linked with his association with Anglo-Adriatic.
The Anglo-Adriatic Fund, which was your fund, I mean, it popped up in the news again recently with the death of Kosta Trubitska.
Yeah, I would say I got a couple of phone calls. That is a disgusting lie that is being spread. We believe from sources within Brussels. It is grossly libelous and it will be actioned.
This startling allegation that political enemies in Brussels were planting false stories in the international media to discredit him demanded further investigation. We spoke to Piero Cucci, the former boss of the Anglo-Adriatic Fund in Albania. He confirmed that Mr. Trubitska had worked for the fund, but said he was not a key figure. Nevertheless, Kosta Trubitska had met Declan Ganley.
No, just we have a chat with him on personal levels, and he just proposed some ideas, and of course it's just exchange of ideas, but nothing real to be realized.
Journalist Habyan Hassani interviewed Kosta Trubitska on April 8th last. He was interested in how closely connected Mr. Trubitska was with the foreigners behind the fund.
Unë e pyeta atë direkt, a ke punuar siç flitet në Anglo-Adriatica? Ai më tha, po, unë kam drejtuar aty. Tash, në qoftë se ju keni drejtuar aty, mendoj se mund të keni njohur dhe bosin e kësaj firme, dhe zotin Declan Ganley, më tha Kosta. Po, e kam njohur, kam njohur dhe vllajën e tij, kontaktova para pak ditësh me të dhe e filloi të fliste për vllajën e tij në moment I thash stop, unë s'më intereson vllai I zotit Ganley, më intereson historia e Anglo-Adriatikës.
Indeed, numerous sources in Tirana expressed surprise that Kosta Trubitska's key role in the Anglo-Adriatic Fund was being queried. We went to the person who was closest to him, his widow Leela, who also worked for the fund. Now living under armed guard, she has refused all media interviews since her husband's death.
Now, I've just been able to talk to Mrs. Trubitska there. She doesn't want to come on camera. She says it's still too soon since her husband's death. But she was able to confirm that her husband was a senior person in the Anglo-Adriatic Fund when it was being established. She said he met Declan Ganley many times during this period. She met Declan Ganley herself at this time. And she in fact recalled that on one occasion when Declan Ganley's brother was in Albania, that the three of them took a trip down to the south of Albania to a place called Logger on the coast, and she recalled he used to tell us stories about that trip.
I don't know who the guy is. I hadn't heard his name before. I don't know who he was. Is it possible that he met me and I met? I suppose it's possible, but I don't know who the guy is. And from what I hear, he was a very unsavoury character, which of course is why people have selected somebody who is not around to be able to.
Well, some people would say he's a very laudable character because apparently he was a whistleblower on a bad arms deal.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. I don't know anything about this man, but I do know that I didn't know him. I don't know, and I do know that there is an agenda behind all of this, which is very poisonous.
When we put the details of our investigation to Mr. Ganley, he said he had subsequently asked his staff to inquire into the matter. According to a statement issued through a spokesman, Mr. Ganley can say with absolute certainty that he had never had any significant relationship with Mr. Trubitska. He now acknowledges that Mr. Trubitska had an association with Anglo-Adriatic, but said neither he nor his brother Sean can recall ever meeting him.
only solid evidence that you can seem to touch and feel would be his telecoms contract with the American military, and that's as close as I think as you can get to something that you can lay your hands on and take the measure of.
We're in Crystal City in Arlington, a stone's throw from the Pentagon. This is the epicentre of the American defence industry, a must-have address for defence contractors bidding for billions of dollars worth of government business. And it's right here, in this building right behind me, that Declan Ganley has based his company, Rivada Networks.
Rivada provides life-saving equipment, communications specifically, to people at disaster sites. That's what we're fully focused on. And Declan's fully focused on that as CEO of that organization.
The US invasion and reconstruction of Iraq was a bonanza for Crystal City. Multi-million-dollar contracts were awarded by the Pentagon and processed by the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq.
For all of us serving in the Coalition Provisional Authority at that time, there was tremendous pressure to award contracts in certain ways. We were absolutely steadfast, working with the contracting office to maintain that fair and open competition.
Top of the list was a cell phone network. Iraq was the last country in the Middle East and one of the last countries in the world which had absolutely no widespread cell phone service. So if you were in the cell phone industry, in the mobile telephone industry, Iraq was the pot of gold.
The CPA put 3 mobile phone licenses out to tender. Declan Ganley and Don DeMarino entered a bid called Liberty Mobile. Their bid was unsuccessful. But they soon got a second chance. The CPA wanted a separate phone system for emergency services in Iraq, so the contract for a first responder network was put out to tender. It wasn't as valuable as a commercial license, but it was a contract worth chasing. Ganley and DeMarino teamed up with a native Alaskan corporation, Nana Pacific, and entered a bid through a new entity called Guardian Net.
They were very much helped along by a high-ranking U.S. Pentagon official by the name of Jack Shaw, who was essentially pushing Declan Ganley and Nana Pacific through the contracting process to have them be the ones who built this emergency system.
I thought it was a good idea. DeMarino thought it was a good idea. Declan, I don't think, thought it was a good idea for quite a while. Then he said, basically, let's go for it. That's just the way Declan thinks. If it's a challenge, let's eat him up.
Did you meet Declan Ganley this time?
I actually had met him in the Pentagon in Deputy Undersecretary Shaw's office when he came to do a presentation on his company, which is something that was unusual.
So did you have a sense they had a special relationship with Jack Shaw?
We did get the sense that there was a close relationship.
It's not the friendship issue. I got in this my whole job was to ensure that everything was done correctly and done with utmost speed to get the job done.
The Guardian Net bid looked home and dry. For the CPA, it was just a matter of signing off on the final contract. Then it all went wrong.
In the very final stages of reviewing the technical proposal that had come back from Guardian Net, I noticed right on the first page a line that had been added that the company would also operate a nationwide commercial cellular service. There's a huge difference between a contract for police radios or to test police radios and a cellular license, which is a commercial venture.
So in effect, this is sort of a backdoor way into creating a fourth cell phone network in Iraq in this very rich, very lucrative area. It was a way that they could have suddenly been able to set up and run their own cell phone network without having to have gone through the competition in the first place.
How it got in there, I'm not even embarrassed now that my name is on it. I mean, basically, it was a way of getting the job done and getting it done extremely well.
We sought guidance. We talked with Ambassador Bremer, and they all agreed that at this point it was best, due to the irregularities, to terminate this particular contract and go to fair and open competition.
The deal fell through amid allegations of corruption and illegal activity on both sides. Investigations by the FBI and the Department of Defence found no evidence to support these claims, and no criminal charges were brought against anybody involved.
I'm about as clean as you can get in terms of motivation, what has been proven. And so, but Declan got a hideously bad rap on this because he was basically trying to do the right thing, had the best technology, and was thwarted time and again by corrupt processes.
Or is it not the case that you having lost out of this phone licence, you then got a chance to go in with a police radio emergency network, and that deal fell through because people in the CPA said you were inserting language in your contract which would have allowed you to have a mobile phone contract.
Is that the reason why? You just stated something to me as a point of fact.
Is that not why you were not involved in Iraq?
But you're telling me that that's a fact. It's because because it's not.
You tell me.
The fact is that I had a telephone call with somebody from the CPA who asked me to do something which I considered illegal and improper, and I would not do it, and I walked away from that contract and walked away from doing anything in Iraq.
Can you explain to me what the illegal and improper thing is?
No, it's not appropriate. It's not something for discussion. They have been misleading the public on this issue. They don't want you to read the contract, they just want you to sign it.
Well, the pressure is suddenly on the yes side.
They cannot be trusted on this issue.
Votes in favour of the proposal, 752,451. Votes against the proposal, 862,415.
While his business ventures have taken him around the world, it was his campaign against the Lisbon Treaty this summer that launched him on the Irish political stage.
There is a view out there that Libertas was established to campaign against the Lisbon Treaty.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was established as a think tank back in, I think it was October 2006. And the Lisbon Treaty came along from the summer of 2007. He decided that, we would oppose it and that we would put a lot of energy and effort into doing so, and that this was an opportunity to brand Libertas.
So basically it was almost like a godsend for you guys when you were wondering where next to take the Libertas name.
Yeah, I mean, if you were thinking cynically about it, you might say that, but I mean, the objection to the Lisbon Treaty was genuine.
The defeat of the Lisbon Treaty was a serious reversal for the Irish government and for Brussels, and a truly spectacular success for Libertas. But with success came scrutiny, and more questions than answers.
It filed accounts in 2007 showing that it had no income at all. Those accounts go up to 31st of December 2007. Yet in the first few months of 2008 it's able to run a 1 million plus operation. Subsequent to the campaign, Mr. Ganley said that, in fact, he'd set up a loan facility and that £200,000 have been drawn down to date by Libertas.
That money will be repaid, and there is, I believe, a repayment schedule. And I think that, I think in fairness to Mr. Ganley, he's been perfectly transparent about it since he announced they did it.
So there is a repayment schedule for that loan?
Yes.
Was there any other loans from any other sources?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm not the financial director, but I can say categorically, as far as I'm aware, no.
Can you say categorically, or as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Primetime has learned that the Standards and Public Office Commission's efforts to investigate the source of the Libertas campaign funding have been repeatedly resisted.
They're looking for a copy of your loan agreement.
Yeah.
You haven't engaged with them. So if everything is so by the book, why delay in engaging with them?
We have engaged with them.
As of yesterday, my understanding is you hadn't engaged with them, and they were giving you a deadline in which to engage. They were asking you to engage as a matter of urgency.
We've engaged with the Standards and Public Office Commission since before the referendum started. What is very unfortunate is that some fanatics in Brussels decided that this should be the instrument that they would publicly call upon to bludgeon us. I have to view SIPO as an extension of that agenda. They don't want to be, I'm sure they don't want to be an extension of that agenda, but I now have to view them that way. So that involves legal review and everything else, and that's what we're going to do.
Primetime has learned that Libertas received its final warning from the Standards Commission this week. Should Libertas fail to answer its queries within 7 days, it intends to proceed with its report to the chairman of the All-Ireland, citing Libertas for failing to fulfil its statutory obligations. This lack of transparency in relation to Libertas funding has fueled speculation that it is being bankrolled from abroad. Attention has focused on the former Homeland Security and Pentagon brass on the Rivada board.
There was never among us directors any discussion, I'm sorry to say, about the Lisbon Treaty. I hope that doesn't offend you. But we didn't really look at it.
My understanding is that nothing from Rivada has gone to Libertas. It's not picked up much play here, and it, frankly, some of the things that I've seen actually with my picture in the paper in Ireland have really kind of shocked me. That there is some suggestion that there's some connectivity between dark interests and Mr. Ganley's interests. I think that's crazy.
The CIA, DiMarino steps from the shadows. I've never worked for the CIA. I guess you could just as easily say, well, if you ever did, you certainly wouldn't announce it on Irish TV, would you? I suspect, it can't be proved. It's that thing that can't be proved. But I can say to you, in all honesty, I'm not an intelligence official. I can't say that anybody working in Rivada is not such an official, because I wouldn't have any way to know, but it's, to me, unlikely.
If Libertas is not a front for spooks, could it be a tool for the neocons?
Not even close. I spent my 4 years at the Pentagon fighting those people. Neocon, it's a nice phrase, but what it means is something very different from anything that Declan Ganley has ever even played with, much less become part of.
While he has publicly disavowed the views of American Eurosceptics, his ambitious plans for a pan-European political party have propelled him into an awkward embrace with Eurosceptics on this side of the Atlantic.
You're judged by your associates, and if that's the case, there'd be a fairly harsh judgment on Mr. Ganley, because some of his associates are distinctly odd. They're extreme. They're on the extreme edges of European politics, and their views are quite remarkable.
And to Ireland.
These views include Václav Klaus's belief that climate change is not a man-made problem, or Philippe de Villier's policies on immigration and homosexuality.
The political party will be a success. Will you be part of it?
What Libertas is doing is reaching out, talking to some people who had previously felt like this European project was a no-hoper, and I believe that they can move to the centre, be part of a broad, decent effort to bring democracy back to the European Union.
I think he genuinely feels that he has a role to play in the history of Europe.
There are easier options. You want to go out and do good things. There are plenty of good, noble and worthy good things that you can do, and just have nice profiles done, in newspapers and on RTÉ and everything else. And then there's the really hard stuff, and that involves all sorts of risk, and that's going to get your character assassinated and everything else. But I think it's worth it.